Hello everyone, in this video I want to talk about openings that could be interesting for beginners. I will not go into depth when it comes to the openings in this video, it is rather a finger that points you into a direction. I will talk about one e4 and one d4 opening for white, plus one against e4 and one against d4 for black. I will not include e5 and d5 responses against e4 and d4, not because I think they are bad, but I wanted to include responses that are a bit off the beaten path. For white, e4, the Italian. The Italian is one of the oldest openings that stood the test of time. It's a flexible opening that can lead to slower and positional positions as well as open and tactical positions. Your development is very fast and natural. It also fights for the center. It fulfills all the requirements for a good beginner opening. The drawback of the opening is the fact that black center is not under direct pressure and the c4 bishop might be exposed, but that's it. The variation that I learned first is the 4 knights game Italian variation. It goes like this: 4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6, and bishop to c4. The most popular variation of the Italian game is the Giuoco Piano variation, which starts after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, and bishop to c5. Giuoco Piano roughly translates to soft/slow game. Another variation of the Italian is the Giuoco Pianissimo variation. Starts after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, and pawn to d3. This variation leads to an even slower game than the Giuoco Piano variation. The Italian also has a Gambit that was made popular by Captain William Davis Evans. This variation is more suitable for the aggressive player. You basically give away a wing pawn to develop quickly and create an attack on the opponent's king. Starts with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, and pawn to b4. d4, the London system. The London system is a popular beginner opening for a reason. You can play the London against nearly everything that black plays. This fact alone makes the opening so great for beginners. Also, you are very solid and can develop your pieces safely while still fighting for the center. The only drawback to this opening is that it's not as aggressive as other openings. But that, in my opinion, makes it so good for beginners. You learn to develop your pieces instead of going for silly checkmates. Will not work at a high level. Let me show you the main line of the London. Starts with d4, d5, bishop f4, knight f6, e3, d5, c3, knight c6, knight d2, e6, knight f3, bishop d6, bishop g3, castle, bishop d3, b6, queen e2, and bishop to b7. As you can see, you developed all the pieces that you should develop, and you have a very solid pawn structure. Okay, let's come to openings for black. Caro-Kann against e4. The Caro-Kann is one of the most solid responses to e4. You have a good pawn structure and you are fighting for the center while being safe. Most beginners want to checkmate someone as early as possible. You counter these ideas by being solid and patient. The only drawback could be that you have to learn a bit of theory. Another benefit of this opening is the fact that after playing c6, you are already in the Caro-Kann. Most common responses to the Caro-Kann at the beginner level are the advanced variation, that like this, e4, c6, d4, d5, and e5, and you're already in the advanced variation, and the exchange variation, like this, e4, d6, d4, d5, and pawn takes pawn, and you are in the exchange variation. So I would recommend that if you want to study this opening, to focus on these lines first. The King's Indian against d4. King's Indian is a modern aggressive response to d4. You let white build a strong center to counterattack it later. You can play this opening against anything the white plays after d4. Main line looks like this: d4, knight f6, d4, g6, d3, g7, e4, d6, knight f3, castle, e2, e5, castle, and knight to c6. You can even play it against e4. It just has a different name then. It is called the Pirc Defense instead of the King's Indian Defense. Looks like this. e4, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, and d6. A big portion of why I think it is a good opening for beginners is because you castle early. This prevents a lot of nonsense checkmate patterns that can occur during a beginner game. Okay, that concludes the video. Thank you very much if you watched it until the end. You're awesome.